Welcome to the Freedive Café, episode 26 with Anna von Boetticher. My name is Donny, I'm the host of the Freedive Café. The Freedive Café is long-form interviews that get into the backstories, the training, the challenges, the passions, the fears and personal philosophies of the world's freedivers. You can visit the website at freedivecafé.com where you can find all the episodes to listen to at your leisure. There is a blog which may one day be full of interesting articles and posts, but is currently a little bare. Time is not something I have on my side at the moment, but if you are interested in contributing to the blog, please let me know and we can discuss it further. You can listen to the podcast through Apple Podcasts, and if you have an Android phone, I recommend you check out the Stitcher app, which is how I keep up to date with all my favorite podcasts. Anyway, make sure you subscribe and you'll never miss an episode. Let me remind you that we have a very special offer going on right now for to-be-free freediving equipment. The buoys and lanyards which this small company makes are the best in the world as far as I'm concerned. I've been using them every day at Freedive Gili, and I have my own coming in the mail for when I arrive back in Taiwan. They're the most durable, roomy and goddamn sexiest buoys on earth, and you can get them with free shipping anywhere in the world if you listen to the Freedive Café. To get that offer, you just have to go to tobefreeequipment.com, and when you order your products, just write in the order notes, Freedive Café free shipping. And whether you live in Fiji or Paris, you won't pay a cent for the shipping. The Freedive Café is made possible by the generous support of a small tribe of patrons who donate a little cash to the show every month. Patreon is an amazing way to support the creators you most appreciate, and you can choose to donate any amount you want. I wouldn't be able to do this without Patreon support, and the more people that join the tribe, the easier it gets for me to make the show. If you would like to get on board with that and throw me a dime, go to patreon.com/freedivecafe and take it from there. Another way to support the show is to go to audibletrial.com/freedivecafe and sign up for a free 30-day trial with Audible. If you love podcasts, then surely you love audiobooks. So go and sign up for a free trial and get a free one. It costs you nothing and you get a free audiobook of your choice. There are more than 180,000 titles to choose from. Go to audibletrial.com/freedivecafe and you'll be listening to your new audiobook within minutes. So I'm recording this now as I sit in my little hut on the wonderfully chilled and tropical island of Gili Air in Indonesia. For those of you who are wondering what the hell is going on with me and where the latest episodes are, don't panic. I send regular updates to Patreon supporters, but if you haven't heard from me there, here's the deal. I originally came to Indonesia to do my AIDA instructor course and lots of training, but I made a change of plan and decided to do both SSI and AIDA instructor courses. The reason for this being that I think 2 courses of education under different schools and instructor trainers would serve me even better in my coming career as a freediving professional. I've not been disappointed with my choice and with the quality of education I received here at both schools. By the way, I'm currently wrapping up my AIDA course at Freedive Flow under the guidance of Ollie Kristen and successfully completed my SSI course last week under Victor Reshetniak at Freedive Gili. I have, however, been slightly overwhelmed by just how much work has been involved, and for that reason the podcast has been on the back burner. I'll get 2 episodes out this month, in the next week actually, and then I'll be back in Taiwan in 10 days, and I'll release a new episode each week in May, so there will be 4 episodes, and pretty soon we'll catch up and we'll be back to normal, and everyone will be getting their Freedive Café fix on time. So today's fix comes in the form of an epic interview with the brilliant Anna von Boetticher. Who is Anna? Anna started scuba diving when she was 17 and kept exploring until she was a scuba instructor and deep technical diver, eventually diving to 130 meters on trimix. When she signed up for a freediving workshop in 2007, she was just looking for a little extra experience in the water. Instead, she found a new passion. Just 6 months later, she broke the German depth records and won her first world championship medal. Since 2015, a new challenge has taken up most of her time as she works closely with the German Navy to improve all their diver training and help increase stress resistance and safety underwater. We hear all about Anna's discovery of freediving, her incredible accident during a variable weight world record attempt, and that work she's doing with the German Navy. I'd also like to give a little shout out to my friend and original patron of the show, Veronica Cruz, who might be having coffee with Anna right now in Berlin. Sorry I'm late with the show, guys, but you know how island time is. Enjoy the coffee and the cheese. Okay, are you ready, my friends? Let's dive. Okay, so first of all, just for the benefit of myself and the listeners, whereabouts do you come from? Berlin originally?
No, actually, I'm originally from southern Germany, so I'm from Bavaria. I grew up just outside of Munich, near the mountains, in a small village of around 2,000 people, about
Right.
25 kilometers from Munich. So, yeah, mountains always in the background. And I will still miss mountains wherever I am. If there aren't any nearby, I do miss that.
So you, because I hear that you're also really big into snowboarding.
Oh, yeah.
Is that something that started from a really young age?
Well, actually, obviously, as everyone in southern Germany, we learn to ski when we can kind of walk. So it's a very early childhood memory is skiing with my dad, between his legs. So I skied from a very young age. Then I wasn't ever really a brilliantly good skier. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't like a massive big thing. Then snowboarding started, and I don't know why, but quite early on, I thought, all right, I'll give this a go. It looks fun. And I took a course when everyone was still snowboarding in ski boots back then. And I got totally hooked immediately. So I was 22 or something like that when I first started, which at the time, if you saw another snowboarder on the slopes somewhere, you would wave to them and go over to say hi. Like the first snowboarders I met, they had homemade snowboards. They made them themselves. I couldn't have started from a very young age because it wasn't around. But I started when it was pretty new, let's say. Yeah.
But you started skiing from the get-go, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as everyone would down there. And we skied in our garden, we were going to the ski lift after school and stuff like that. So.
Do you do cross-country skiing in that area too?
I've done it, but when you were there near the mountains, like most of us just went skiing. But I've done some cross-country skiing. It's not quite like a national pastime like it would be in Scandinavia, the Scandinavian countries. But yeah, I've done it. It's exhausting.
Oh, God, it's so hard, isn't it? It's like
right?
I've never done anything so horrifically exhausting before.
I know.
Yeah. I think my ex-girlfriend and her family, they took me out to show me cross-country skiing one time, and being a runner, I thought that's right up my alley. Like I can't run in this like meter deep snow, but at least I can do this cross-country skiing. And they just ridiculed me, basically. It was like an hour of torture and falling at high speed. Really, really hard. So you're from the mountains. Tell us, how did you come to get from the mountains to the sea? How did you first discover freediving?
Well, actually, we had a swimming pool at our house. Like we had a very big garden, so living in a small village outside, the city. So we had massive space, and we had a pool. And I don't know why, but I was always really attracted to the idea of underwater. I think maybe it's being attracted to the unknown spaces. One journalist once asked me what I always wanted to do as a child, and it was actually a really good question because I said to her, I actually always wanted to be an astronaut for a very long time. That was what I was going to be. I was going to fly to the moon. And when I got a bit older, I realized people had already been on the moon. So I decided I was going to be on the first mission to Mars. That was my plan in life. And so I think I was always attracted to the sort of unknown. So my favorite Tintin comics were the ones with the space rocket where they go to the moon, and then there was one where they go in the submarine to the bottom of the sea. So either of those kind of places where you shouldn't go as a human fascinated me. And I used to play in our swimming pool, as kids will, holding your breath. And actually, I already did dynamics in our little swimming pool, dynamic no fins, until I started having contractions. And I must have been around, I don't know, 8. I remember explaining this to my little brother, how you can keep swimming until your stomach starts moving. But when that happens, it doesn't matter at all. You can keep going. And then eventually your arms and legs will start to feel really, really heavy. And that doesn't matter either. You can still keep swimming. And then when it starts to sort of go black at the edges, then you have to go up. So I was doing dynamics in our swimming pool to the point of tunnel vision. Obviously by myself, age 8, explained how to do this to my brother. And probably it's the most dangerous thing I've ever done in diving, in scuba or freediving. The closest I've probably ever come to death is doing that in our swimming pool at home on my own. So yeah, I don't know. It was always there, and I always felt this fascination to the underwater world. I wanted to dive from a really early age, and we always used to go to holidays by the sea a lot. My dad was sailing, so we went sailing with the whole family. And then obviously, there's snorkeling and swimming down and all those things start happening. And it just went from there, really. Starting with scuba diving initially, obviously. And freediving came later, like proper freediving.
So did you start scuba diving from as a child?
Not as a child, because it wasn't really available. But I actually freedived. I freedived to 16 meters when I was around 14 once, because my brother had accidentally chucked all the cutlery overboard with the washing up water in the bucket, and we had no cutlery anymore except like one spoon for 12 people, and I was the only one who could swim down and pick it up from the bottom, and it was around 16 meters. And I said to my dad, I want to learn to dive. I want to scuba dive. I want to scuba dive. And when I was 17, I was in boarding school, and we were near a lake in Germany, and there we managed to get a few of us got together and basically organized that a teacher was coming to teach us scuba diving. It was a CMAS course. And so I did my first scuba dive in a lake in Germany in October. It was 6 degrees in the water and pitch black, and I thought it was the best thing I've ever done. And I went from there. So to do all the courses later on and become an guide and instructor and work as a guide and a scuba instructor. When I had a break from ever so often, I used to go to Thailand and Egypt and so on to work. And I loved it. I was really fully into scuba diving, very big.
I hear that you've been really deep in scuba too.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, because what was happening was I was working a lot as a guide and an instructor, and eventually the day came when I realized that I don't find scuba diving itself challenging anymore, because when you do that, you're always diving with people that are less experienced with you most of the time because you're working, right? So the dive is maybe challenging for them, but the dive itself is not challenging for you. The challenging part is maybe looking after people, but the dive itself isn't. And I felt that I was getting bored with the diving, and that obviously I didn't like that at all. And I thought, right, I want to learn. I want to be unsure of whether I can do this. I want to feel like I need to concentrate, and maybe I'll be nervous. Like I want to feel like I'm growing in scuba diving. And it was the early days of tech diving that had just sort of started to become a little bit more accessible to people. And when I was there in Sharm, there were people joining the 100 club, which meant that you'd been to 100 meters on air on a single tank. And I mean, I've done my stupid stuff. I've also been to 80 something meters on a single tank on air, like we all used to do. I am not proud of it at all, and I thought I have no desire to join this 100 club in this way. There's no skill involved. You deflate your BCD at the surface, you drop down, you hope for the best, you go back up again. I mean, you don't have to know anything, you don't have to learn anything. It's just a Russian roulette. So I thought that's really actually not that interesting, and I decided I wanted to visit the 100 meters, but do it properly. So I went out to look for a tech diving instructor. But really back then, it wasn't like I'm just going to go and sign up for a course somewhere. I was literally looking for the right place to do it, the right instructor to do it with. When I was working in the Red Sea College in Sharm el-Sheikh, I felt like I was in the right place, and I found the right person, a guy called Aaron Bruce from Scotland. He was back then operations manager, one of the operations managers of the Red Sea College, and was in charge of their technical diving program. And I signed up for the course there and was going to go all the way to trimix to get to 100. And I was so excited. And I remember that the process for me to do the normal first level course, I had to email Aaron everything I'd done in scuba diving and who with, like where had I done my instructor course, where had I done this and that. And then, and unbeknownst to me, he actually emailed the person I'd done my assistant instructor course with and asked them what kind of diver I was before he accepted me on the course. Like that was how it was back then, how selective the people were on who they were going to teach this kind of diving. So it was amazing. Like I had a really exceptionally good instructor who I still have. Many things he taught me back then are still things that resonate with me on how I freedive, I would say. It's just stuck. On how you manage risk, how you approach risk, how you do certain things. It becomes ingrained when you do that kind of diving. And I went through all the courses there really quickly and set out to do my 100-meter dive. And actually turned out to be 130 because we went straight. Me and a friend went straight to Dahab and dived 130 meters through the arch, and it was the most spectacular thing ever on trimix. It was just outstanding, absolutely stunningly beautiful. Really, one of my great memories of diving, of any of them, was that dive. It was really my first dive after qualifying trimix, maybe a little bit not very conservative, but stunning, absolutely stunning. Loved it.
Before we dive into the freediving part of your life, I just want to ask you one more question. Do you still plan to go to Mars?
Oh my God, I would love it, but I don't think I would love the time it would take to get there. That's the part of the journey that would, I think, be a bit annoying by now. But yeah, I'd still love it. Yeah, I still find it so fascinating. I would absolutely love it. I'd love to work with some astronauts. That would be so interesting. I know Guillaume did it, and it's very funny because I've been seeing Guillaume at the I'm the on-stage presenter for the big stage at our water sports trade show, Boot Düsseldorf, which is actually the biggest water sports trade fair in the world. And Guillaume comes for Cressy every year, and I have him on stage with me, and I get to interview people on stage. It's quite interesting. So I have now in last year I've had a lot of freedivers, which has been really cool. Like I've had Fred Boyle, I've had Guillaume, so I've had my friends basically up on stage with me, which has been a lot of fun. And actually was talking to Guillaume backstage before we went on, and he told me that he'd just been to work with this astronaut, and I was like, that's absolutely amazing. I'm so jealous because I always wanted to be an astronaut, and so did he when he was a kid. So yeah, we were like, that's it, isn't it? That magic of unusual spaces, that seeking unusual spaces. And that journalist way back that asked me that question, she then said, well, maybe, going down to more than 100 meters in the sea with a sled is a little bit like flying to the moon. And I guess there is that element of it, that being out there. It's a bit like a spacewalk, right? You're there in that part of the universe where you got no business to be all by yourself. I think there's also that loneliness to deep freediving that attracts me. The fact that you're alone down there. Yeah, obviously there are people up there looking after you, but you're exposed to a massive, vast space in the universe, and you're all alone. And I find that amazing. So that has parallels to stepping out of your space shuttle, I think.
Yeah, it's like as close as because I'm a huge space geek as well, and I think it's as close as we can get to a spacewalk or shooting ourselves out into the blackness of the universe, right?
It is, isn't it? I mean, last year I did for fun. So my project last year was I didn't have a lot of time to train at all because I haven't had for the last sort of 4 years or so. So last year I decided, right, I have very limited time to train. So what I want to go and freedive in places I haven't been before. Which is why I actually went to Vertical Blue finally for the first time. And I also went to a lake in Germany, which is near where I grew up, very close. We used to go hiking there. It's a mountain lake, and it's 198 meters deep. And it is absolutely spectacular because the mountains in the background, it's super beautiful. And the water, at the surface, you have your normal temperature and your regular visibility. It's quite good. It's maybe around, 8 or 10 meters for a lake. It's pretty decent. But then you come into a layer where it gets very, very, it gets quite bad, the visibility, and around, maybe 30, it gets less. So you only have about 4 or 5 meters. And because of that layer below it, it filters out all the light. And when you get below it, it's pitch black dark, absolutely black. And I freedived the first time I went down to 50 meters. We were on a wall where that's around 130 meters deep. So you've got nothing anywhere around. We were just drifting. And I opened my eyes, and I had a light with me, and opened my eyes, looked at the bottom plate, and it was hanging in this vast darkness, absolutely pitch black. But the water at that level, again, is crystal clear, absolutely pristine, crystal clear. There is no particle in it. It's almost like air. And so I opened my eyes, and there's nothing near me, nothing below me, nothing above me. You just see black. But I could crystal clearly see the line and the plate with no disturbance. And I thought, this is the most amazing thing. It was 4 degrees down there. It was 25 at the surface. So you can imagine the thermocline.
Small thermocline.
And I opened my eyes, and I thought, this is the most amazing thing. It's like being in space. I felt like I was in space. It's outstanding. One of the really most fascinating dives I've done is in that lake. Yeah, opening my eyes down there.
That's amazing.
Looking around, amazing. I really loved it.
What's the name of that lake?
It's called Walchensee.
So, how did you get from scuba to freediving?
Actually, so this was a total accident and not planned. I was doing really deep technical diving and had started. I was going to 130, and I've done technical trimix dives below 100, a whole lot of them, and had also started diving on a rebreather because I was starting to look at the 150 and deeper, possibly in technical diving. And the 150 meters I still could have done open circuit, so it would have still been all right carrying air in the tanks. But to get deeper than that, you would have started to be a good idea to have a rebreather. So there's lots and lots of elements of risk involved in all of this. And I was always really cautious of managing the risk. And to me, any knowledge you have of yourself in the water, any experience of yourself, your reactions, and so on, will make you better and stronger and more likely to survive in the event that everything will go wrong. Because it just gains you confidence and self-knowledge, self-awareness is just extremely important when you're doing such risky things. You have to early on recognize problems when you're on a rebreather, for example, small changes in your physiology, in how you feel. If you recognize early that something's not right because you're feeling a bit weird, you might be able to solve a problem before it gets a problem. You have around a minute in a rebreather before things can be unsolvable, basically. So you need to recognize what's going on. So I wanted a bit of freediving experience, just to have more knowledge of myself, really, for the deep technical diving, the complicated technical and dangerous technical diving I was doing. And I signed up for a weekend course in the UK because I was living in London, in a SET tank, a submarine escape training tank, down in Portsmouth, and it was run via Deeper Blue by Emma Farrell, actually. So they used to run these courses down there, and I thought, right, brilliant, this will be so much fun. And I remember getting there, and they, after a little briefing and everything, they took us up to the top of the tower. It's a big tower that this tank is in. And they took us up to the top, and you get out on the 10th floor, and you look down from the window at the parking lot, and you just think, oh, this is really a very, very long way down. And then you look into this tank, and because it's narrow and it's a tube, it's lit all the way to the bottom. It's 28 meters deep. 28 meters looks really deep. And I remember thinking, wow, if I could maybe get halfway, that would be really fantastic. And it took me 2 hours, and I was on the bottom, and thinking, why on earth is here a bottom? How can I get deeper? There's a bottom here. I don't like it. And that night, I was so excited, incredibly excited by this discovery. And I remember lying in bed and having this fleeting thought: if I could do 60 meters one day, if I could free dive to 60 meters, that would be amazing. I don't know where the 60 came from. It was just a random idea that I got stuck in my head that first evening. And it was supposed to be a little experience for extra safety in technical diving. And it turned out that I haven't done a tech dive since. I was lost. I was hooked. Yeah.
Ruined your tech diving life.
It did. Yeah, it did completely. It's gone. I don't, I'm not averse to it. I'm not one of those freedivers that goes, oh my God, how can you wear all these tanks? And I'm so glad I'm not doing that anymore. Not at all. I'd love to still be doing it. Absolutely would love it. It's a question of time. Tech diving I was doing at a high level. It requires training, focus, preparation, staying in training. Like you don't, stay at home, back at home working for 8 months, and you go to Egypt for 2 weeks and you do dives beyond 100 meters. That would be a very bad idea. So you need to stay with it. You need to be trained, and it takes time. And now that time is going for freediving. So I just don't have the time to do both, really. They don't mix well.
You've done some pretty huge free dives. And I wonder, how much crossover do you think there was in just psychologically being adjusted to such depths? I mean, having been at 130 meters with tanks, do you think that helped you mentally to go that deep without tanks?
Yes, massively so. I think that's a huge factor in my freediving, that I have so much background experience and for such a long time of being in the water, being deep in the water, having experienced also a multitude of problems at depth. I'm very, very mentally depth adapted. And I remember when, I'd done my little course with Emma and then decided, right, I want to do loads more freediving immediately. I'm going to become an instructor so I can freedive without paying for it always, and just set out to do my courses. In fact, the first one after that, like just a few weeks after this little SET tank experience, I went to Dahab and did my first proper IDA, up to the 3-star with Lotta and Linda in Freedive Dahab. And what happened was that I went back to Dahab for 2 weeks to train a little bit and just freedive, and I got to 48 meters, I think, at the time. And someone I'd met there said, oh, wow, brilliant. I'd just come back with this PB. And they said, oh, brilliant. So now you've probably been deeper freediving than you ever have in scuba. And I remember laughing and saying, no, that is impossible. I can never do the depth freediving that I've done on tanks. And I remember thinking, actually, it's true. For most people, if they have scuba dived before, 40 meters would have been deep in scuba. So going beyond that without tanks, mentally, everything in you would tell you that that's very deep and it's dangerous and you're deep. Whereas to me, just the number 60 doesn't sound deep, because in scuba diving, to me, that was deep. Of course, you have to pay attention to it. But for my mind, that's just not an issue. That is not deep. So all those numbers to me never sounded deep, because that's a normal depth for me to go to. So my subconscious doesn't rebel at these numbers. And I've never been one of those freedivers that have moments of fear at depth. You know, a lot of people know that turning around at the bottom and having that moment of fear, like, oh my God, it's so far back to the surface, and that feeling of wanting to sprint. I've never had that. And I think that's largely to do with the fact that I've been down there so much already that those depths the depth itself isn't a worrying thing to me.
Yeah, I can imagine that it gave you a huge advantage. You did your first sort of standard freediving courses with Lotta and Linda at Freedive Dahab.
That's right.
Did you stay there and just continue on until the instructor level, or did that take you some more months?
No, I was there for a week and did the 2 and the 3 star in that week with Linda, and then went back to the UK and continued to do my 4 star with Emma, nicely in lakes and things, and then I also did instructor course with Emma that same summer. So the first set tank experience was in March, and I did the instructor course sometime in the summer. But I also thought that if I'm going to be an instructor, it's a big thing in freediving is competition. So students will always ask you about that. So at least I should have done one competition just to have done one and be able to say what it feels like and what happens and so on. So I signed up for the salt-free competition in the UK. In Chepstow, it's a quarry, and actually did pretty well. I'd done the 3rd deepest dive in Germany ever, and it sort of qualified me for the World Championships. So I was very suddenly qualified for the World Championships, which were in November in Sharm, having started freediving in March. And then I thought, okay, well, if I'm now qualified for a World Championships, obviously I have to train. So I had 1 month before that I went to Dahab to train in Dahab, and it was amazing because it was full of freedivers back then. Everybody was there, everyone was training for the Worlds, and Lotta and Linda were running triple depth 2 weeks before the Worlds. So maybe I was even there 6 weeks before the Worlds because I think I had a month to train before triple depth. So they were running triple depth 2 weeks before, so everyone was using that as like a little practice competition. And there was everyone there. There was Herbert Nietzsche, there was William Winram, William Trubridge, Carlos Costa, Natalia Molchanova, everyone really, all the big names. And being just a very fresh freediver, it was quite wild and rather inspiring. And I ended up really diving with a lot of very, very good people. And that's also an environment where it helps to break down your barriers, because when everyone around you is diving so deep, you don't really think that it's very deep when you're going to 50. Like it just takes the brakes off, doesn't it? And it was a lot of fun. It takes you out of
your own head a little bit.
Yeah, it does, right? And it was so much fun, and there was always someone to train with and to safety you. And that's the time when Sarah and I trained together. We had a really great training partnership. I was staying with her, and it just worked really well. I think that's one of the essential things that people overlook, is how important it is to find the right person or the right group of people to train with, because they have a huge effect on how your diving goes. And Sarah and I were just a brilliant team. We had loads of fun, and both of us were going really well. And in that triple depth competition, she got 3 world records and I got 3 national records, and it was well successful for the two of us. Yeah, it was brilliant fun.
Yeah, it sounds like an amazing initiation as well into the whole culture or subculture of freediving and the competition environment.
It was, and I was so incredibly nervous. I had no coach, and it was my first real proper big competition. And I'd been to that little competition in the lake, but this was sort of it. And then, you have people doing world records left, right, and center. It was pretty wild, but really fun. And the World Championships afterwards, the same. I went on to do another 2 national records there and accidentally almost get a bronze medal in no fins, my hate discipline. Quite interesting how that turns out in World Championships sometimes. And I just was hooked, really. I have to say, completely, as we all get. I think once you get something, you want more, don't you? Like that's the thing in freediving. For me, also, 2 things met each other. I really like sport. I really enjoy sport, although I never actually competed particularly, except in school. when it was team sports. But really love sport, really love exercise, and I love diving. And those two things before did not belong together, because scuba diving for sure is not exercise. And now freediving, and so it was diving and sport had met each other. And to me, that was just brilliant.
Perfect
absolutely
combination
fantastic.
for you.
Yeah, awesome. Love it. Still do.
Sounds like it sounds like it was relatively easy for you to progress as a freediver. Like physically, I mean, did you have any trouble with equalization or your physical condition or anything like that? It seems like you went pretty deep pretty fast.
Yeah, I went deep fast, which is actually quite interesting, and I think that really has a lot to do with the mental barrier. Like, I just don't have the mental barrier. I think that a lot of people struggle with. But physically, I have a lot of issues. So I have very early urge to breathe always, and still do. And I have a ridiculously bad, like zero ability to bring up air deep. Used to have to take my mouthful at 15 meters. Before I was packing, and now I really only pack a little bit just to be able to take the mouthful a little bit deeper, and it was very hard. I'm really inflexible, very prone to cramps, have 70% lung volume, so I got around 20 to 25% less than I should have.
Why is that?
Actually, it's because I have quite a strong curvature of the spine, and on the right side, the ribs are compressing the lung, so that I can't breathe into it fully, basically. Which actually is why I think I can pack a hell of a lot. So, and I don't. I mean, if I practice dry, like if I pack dry, I can actually pack 100 of my small packs that I do. I can easily do 100. When I'm free diving, I normally for constant weight, I might do around 20 to maybe 25. When I was sled diving, I was doing like 35. So if you think that I can pack 100, I'm doing between 20 and 35 when I dive deep. So literally to be able to take the mouthful a little bit deeper and to actually counteract a little bit the pressure of the suit. But yeah, so I'm still unable to bring up air deep. Andrea should not listen because it drives him crazy. and I had loads of issues with equalization, as we all do. I'm definitely not someone who's hands-free or anything nice like that. And I had to practice a lot. And I still hate and struggle like hell with diving with a nose clip. I just don't like it. I really can't get used to it. So I was diving with a mask always for a very long time, until just now, really. I've only just now started to force myself. So this year I decided I have to do everything with a nose clip. I'm not allowed to wear the mask anymore, because if I don't, I'll never learn it. If I don't just do it sometime. But I'm cursing. I hate it. And it's not working. So I'm stuck currently in a maximum of 70 with equalization. With a nose clip. Yeah, so I've got the usual troubles that everybody does.
So you didn't just
but mentally I was going to wherever.
Some kind of like fully
prodigy.
Formed, perfect freediving machine. Yeah.
Oh no.
That's good to know. No. For the rest of us listening.
Oh yeah, I still have contractions on the way down and all that. Like the last German record in no fins I did in vertical blue, I had contractions on the way down starting in 15 meters. So it's sure not beautiful. And then I mess up the equalization with the nose clip and I swallow the air and I block my soft palate and it's such a mess.
So it's that's kind of a good thing in a sense, because it's work in progress, right? And there's still a lot of improvement to be made.
Exactly. And that's the fun of it, isn't it, as well? So it's frustrating. Of course, it's totally frustrating to be stuck in 70 meters now, when I know that probably if I stuck my mask on and I'd practice a little bit, I dived to 125 meters with a mask, so and to 81 in constant weight with a mask, and it was fine. I had space left to go. The thing is that I'm obviously also unpracticed at the moment, because I've had a few years of really deep diving and haven't had time to practice, and we all go backwards when we don't dive. Like you lose it again, unfortunately. It's not like riding a bicycle, I find, at all. You just going back to having to start all over again. And then when you change something like sticking a nose clip on, you start all over again with that. And I actually changed just when I went to Cyprus, I used a new nose clip, one of Alexei's multi-nose nose clips, which is much prettier than the very ugly nose clip I had before. I also have somehow a weird nose that no nose clip fits my nose. I always lose air. So everything in me doesn't want to do this, actually, I think, including my nose. So I was using Alexei's nose clip, and it's much nicer, it's much prettier, and it looks better in photos, and I like it more. But it took me 3 weeks to realize that the reason why I suddenly was stuck in 60 instead where I was stuck in 70 at the World Championships in Roatan this year was because this nose clip is sitting in a different place on my nose. So it sits higher up and closes more of the nose. And so I have less air in the nose. And actually that was putting me 10 meters back again. And so it's such fine, tiny details, that you still have to fiddle with and figure out. And there's always something new. When you change the smallest thing, everything gets out of whack and you have to get used to that again. So, you take 3 steps back sometimes to take 4 steps forwards, hopefully eventually. And it's such a process. And I think that's also what attracts me to it, because I'm always like looking for the next thing that's going to challenge me. I like learning. I like having to figure things out, not being sure if I can do it. And that's fun to me and what I'm always looking for. And in freediving, it's just endless. It doesn't stop.
So what is your favorite discipline?
I think my favorite discipline is actually constant weight. I love the sled, absolutely, hugely enjoy it. I think maybe because I've always been attracted to depth, like the pure depth, also in scuba diving. So that's why I like the sled, because
it's kind of like
it's
a spaceship as well, or something, isn't it?
Yeah,
like,
it is, right? It is. It's just like whizzing down there and back up. I find it totally magical, and I love it and hugely enjoy it. It also has absolutely been brilliant for training equalization and depth adaptation and so on. But I like it for itself, and think because I'm so used to technical diving. From technical diving, I'm very used to having equipment and dealing with equipment and operating equipment. So the fact that I have a thing with a brake and a tank and something, I have to open the valve and to remember to do it and when to do it and all these things, it doesn't freak me out. In fact, I enjoy it. It's fun. But as if I have to choose a discipline, I think constant weight is the most beautiful to me because it's the deepest. In the unassisted freediving, let's say, so without sled, it's the deepest discipline. And since I'm purely attracted to maximum depth mostly, and visiting the deep places on this planet, it's the nicest for me because I can get the deepest with the monofin or the bifins, really.
So you say that you haven't been training very much these last few years, but in an ideal situation, where would you be training, and what would like a typical week of training look like for you?
Yeah, so I can never really train at home. I'm always thinking every winter, I'm thinking this winter I'm going to do pool training. I'm going to do it. I'm going to pool train and do statics and dynamics, and it will get me ready for the freediving season. And it never happens because I'm away too much, I travel too much, and I just can't go to a regular pool training session. I might be able to go once, and then I won't be able to go for 5 weeks, and then I'll go twice, and it's just useless. It just doesn't happen. So for me, freediving really happens when I take a block of time to do it, and that's the only way it works. So that's usually obviously not in Germany because not quite good enough around here. So it might be, say, in Egypt or anywhere else where it's a bit warmer. And ideally, I would start getting when I've had a long winter break, which can be, I've had eight months off over the winter, a lot of the time, which is a long time. So then you need to. It's ages, yeah. So it needs time to just get back in the water, and that's 8 months off completely. So no pool training, no nothing, right? That's 8 months without holding my breath, basically. So when you get somewhere, I need to allow my body to catch up to that and my mind. So usually the first week is very gentle. I'll just be doing some hangs and I'll do some pull downs, starting with a maximum of 30, because in fact, that early on, I will feel the pressure on my chest even in 40 meters. So I don't go below 30 for a day or two. And then if that's all right, I'll gently go to 40 and I'll be there for another day or two, depending on how long I've had off. And then once that's okay, that can be, you know, anything between 3 and 5 days of just doing that. Once that feels all right, it's usually open. Then I'm usually okay to go to pretty much whichever depth without squeezing. So after that, I can just get on with it, and I'll be training. But you know, it'll go from 40 to 50, 50 to 60, let's say. But that could be a jump. You know, I might stick around 30 to 40 for 5 days, and then I can do 50 the next day and 60 the day after. Like then I'm okay. And depending on how much time I have when the competition is, yeah. So good example is in 2016 I went to Vertical Blue, and I had 8 months off of absolutely no breath hold, no water, no nothing, and I had 2.5 weeks to train for Vertical Blue. Started, so that's nothing after 8 months off. You can imagine. So in fact, also this year, the 2 times I've been to Vertical Blue, both of them have been after such a long winter break. So that's why in those Vertical Blues I didn't dive deep, and instead focused on no fins, which I've ignored all my freediving life until then, because no fins isn't deep. So I don't need depth adaptation for it, because I really strongly believe that to get really deep, you need to allow time for depth adaptation. And that takes a while. Like your body needs to be allowed to catch up with that. It's not enough after being out of the water for 9 months. 2 weeks is definitely not anywhere near enough. And the thing is also that before the 9 months, I hadn't been able to dive deep in that year. So the deepest I was I'd done 170 meter dive, you know, and so that I hadn't even been deep in the year before. So it was probably 2 years before that I had been to 100 with a sled. So it's ages since I've done proper depth. So I can't just arrive there and expect to hit 80, you know, in 3 weeks. That's a very short cut to really squeezing yourself and hurting yourself. So yeah, so you have to accept that. It's currently my limit is the lack of time to do depth adaptation. And so I've been diving no fins, which is a massive challenge to me. So if I'm looking for a challenge, there is one right there. And that, you know, was enough to entertain me. It was pretty damn hard though, because after such a long break to kick off with no fins is also not exactly being gentle with yourself, let's say.
Yeah, it's so challenging and technical as well, isn't it?
And I've never done it, and it's just awful, and I have contractions on the way down. And I was also then obviously diving with the nose clip, which is one reason to switch to the nose clip, because I need to use the nose clip for no fins. And I have contractions which then steal my mouthful, and I close the soft palate, and then I can't open it anymore. So I was having even massive issues with equalizing just to get to 50 in no fins. So all the combination of doing no fins plus having contractions plus being unable to equalize was really quite a headache. But yeah, there's your challenge, and it was fun, and it's enough. Then I have enough feeling that I'm pushing myself to something. It feels like sport. And I curse it, and I hate it, and I moan and whine, and my poor buddies have to listen to me. But then I just go, oh, fuck it, right, I'm just going to do it. And get on with it. And then I'm quite pleased with myself afterwards. And I think, I'm going to do this again. And then when I'm on the line, I'm thinking, why did I not do the steps? Why have I done this? Oh, God, every single time. Yeah, and it goes round in circles.
So it's interesting what you say about that you really recognize the need for adaptation to depth, gradual adaptation to depth. Have you ever had any trouble with lung squeezes or trachea squeezes or anything like that?
I've had some trachea squeezes, I think, as most of us who freedive deep really have. And that's mostly because I find it very hard not to look at the bottom. And I used to also get them when I was still diving on with the mouthful, but frenzeling. So I found that when I've switched to constant pressure, so I don't really do much frenzeling on the dive if everything goes well, and that's helped massively with avoiding trachea squeezes, because you just don't have any stress, right, on the throat, especially at depth. It's a much gentler way to dive. And so I've had some of those. It used to be because I used to look. I used to really be totally unable to not look at the bottom. Until, and that's really fixed that for me, I've started using depth alarms. So I will have a depth alarm, usually even quite early before the plate, like a minimum of 5 meters before the plate for sure. But I might even have it as, 8 meters before the bottom, because my mind is like, I'm always thinking, am I there yet? Am I there yet? Am I there yet? How much longer? Am I there yet? Am I there yet? And I want to look so badly. And somehow, weirdly, you just have to sometimes trick yourself. I am able to wait for the alarm calmly. I'm not able to wait for the plate. So I can wait for the alarm, that's fine. So if I know I have an alarm 8 meters off the plate, then I'm good. I can wait for that. That's no problem. And then I don't look. And that's really helped with not having trachea squeezes. I've been really fortunate with lung squeeze. I haven't really had any issues with lung squeeze. I had one once when I messed up a FRC dive, when I was still using FRCs to warm up. And I think I've stopped. I don't do any FRCs anymore at all, and haven't during the entire deep sled diving and everything. I did all of that completely without any FRCs, and found that it was much better that way. There was no squeezing or anything for me. The risk of messing up the FRC is actually quite big, and especially you might be a little bit pre-squeezed from your warm-up, which you don't even recognize, and then might squeeze yourself some more on your dive, right? Because it's so hard to do the FRC just right. Like, what is just right? Now that we've had the scientists doing ultrasound on us, they've really shown us how, when we feel no symptoms whatsoever at all, there are comets, as they call them. So there are small symptoms of fluid in the lungs visible to them. So it's there already, but you don't feel it. And so if you're doing an FRC, you may very well have some of that already. You might not feel it. Then you go on your big dive, and then you've already got a little bit of a squeeze, and then you go for your dive. And I found that when you do an FRC in a warm up, for me anyway, especially if it's either a big training dive or it's a competition dive, you have a mental need for that to be a good FRC, right? You want it to be a good one, a deep one, because then you feel more ready. Like, you feel like everything's going well, if you've been quite deep on your FRC and your warm up. So the tendency is, I think, to mess that up. The potential is quite high. And that's for sure. That's once I had a pretty decent lung squeeze, not spitting blood, but I felt the fluid in my lungs. And it was actually from an FRC on a warm up that I'd messed up. And in fact, I didn't go on my dive then, because when I came up, I thought, okay,
time to stop for the day.
Yeah, that's it. I'm done.
So how deep was that FRC? How deep were you doing FRCs?
Well, that's not. Oh God, I'm not that good with all these things. Like I said, I'm really terrible with. So that was probably around 25, but it was a similar situation where I hadn't been, it was after the winter, I hadn't been freediving, and I wasn't ready for that yet. I've done FRCs to 30, that's the sort of deepest I've been on a FRC. But like a 28 meter FRC for me is really deep. And a 25 was definitely too deep at that point, right? It's like, you need to be ready for it, and I wasn't. And it was definitely, So that's one time I clearly gave myself a squeeze through a mistake. The only real squeeze that I had that was quite a bad one was after, obviously, I had my accident on my 130 meter variable weight attempt. But that was due to having contractions in 120 meters. Obviously, nobody would get away with that without squeezing, I don't think. So that was a full-on proper squeeze with blood and all the rest of it. But that's the only one I had, really, that was really like a bad one. I'm lucky, and I think it's hard to explain. We don't really know why sometimes some people squeeze. We know by now that there's a genetic factor. Some people have a genetic predisposition for it. But on the whole, we still really understand very little. And it's ridiculous that I don't seem to squeeze, because I'm so inflexible. Like, if I was to do that whole yoga, suck your tummy up thing, like, I have a mild. Yeah, that's my technical term for that thing that freedivers do. I have like a mild dent in my tummy. Like, it's almost invisible. it doesn't go anywhere, which is also why it's so hard for me to charge a mouthful anywhere at any decent depth. But it goes nowhere, and still I don't squeeze, and I don't seem to squeeze. So it's very hard to say why some of us do and some of us don't. For sure, one thing I think that helped me is that I really pay attention to taking time to the depth adaptation and until that I feel ready for it, and I'm very, very careful with that and very aware of it. And I think you need to physically adapt and mentally adapt, and that's also one factor that people tend to ignore. I think the time it takes for your subconscious mind to catch up to what you're doing and to be okay with it and to be good at depth. There's one thing of just getting there. Another thing is getting there very safely. Two totally different things.
So you did mention there your accident during your world record attempt in variable weight to 130 meters. Maybe you could just talk us through exactly what happened there, because it's quite interesting, the cause of the difficulties. So for the listeners who haven't heard the story, what actually happened on that dive?
Yeah, that is really a freak incident. So what happened was I was going for a 130-meter variable weight record in Sharm el-Sheikh at the time. And the reason being, I mean, I'd done 100 meters in variable already with pretty little training. And I started to realize that there was a lot more potential there for me to go deeper. And I had this moment where I thought, this is brilliant, because when I was really that little freediver of a few weeks and someone said to me, oh, now you freedive deeper than you ever did in scuba, I said, I can't ever freedive that deep, what I did with tanks. And then I realized that actually I can. So I can get to the same depth that I did with tanks. And I thought that'll just be amazing. So that was my plan. I just actually wanted to hit the same depth without tanks that I'd done with. That was really sort of, say, my personal magic in this. And it also happened that it would have been a world record, wouldn't be anymore now, but it would have been a world record at the time. So, we thought, all right, let's do a world record attempt. And I'd done a lot of training. I was in Sharm and already spent 6 weeks sort of around March, April, training there. And then we had like a 6 weeks break, and I came back to keep training, and we'd done the 125 meter tandem world record, Andrea and I, which was largely for fun and was just part of my training, because obviously I needed to get to that depth and to learn the equalization. And Andrea was my coach; he was teaching me equalization, so he used to come with me sometimes.
Andrea Zuccari, just for
Andrea Zuccari. That's right.
Yeah.
So he was really already then starting to be the absolute expert in teaching equalization, and I think I was possibly one of his main research projects on that. So he used to come with me on the sled anyway to check what the hell I was doing, and so we started training together on the sled and ended up with this like fun project of doing the tandem no limits world record. And we'd been to 125 meters and it all gone well. It was quite brilliant with the mask, and so we switched to training variable and thought, right, this is cool, we're ready. And with some problems in the middle, as you always have, it's always going backwards a bit before you get forwards. It eventually started to all fall into place, and I felt really ready for the dive. So on the day itself, what happened was, it's a classic thing which we recognize when we look at risks actually in scuba diving, in freediving, or aviation, all those kind of things, is that you have a chain of events that usually starts with something really small. And you actually have to identify where that was, where the starting point was. And in our case, the starting point was, and I actually have this on video somewhere, Marco, the other guy, Marco Nones, from Only One Apnea Center, which is where I was training at the time, he said to me, remember the strap when I was putting my mask and my fin on to get ready for the dive. He said, remember the strap, meaning remember to tighten the mask strap, because what had happened on some of the training dives, I like wearing the mask quite loose. It annoys me if it's really tight, but it had been so loose that on the way down, I go with quite a lot of speed, close to 2 meters a second. The strap had come off and had actually been floating around in front of my face when I reached the bottom. So I'd nearly lost the mask. I'm obviously not losing it on the way down because I'm holding my nose, but taking my hand off my nose at the bottom, I could have lost the mask. So Marco said to me, "Oh yeah, tighten the strap." So I did. And here's mistake. Here was the whole thing that set everything that followed in motion. It was that I tightened the mask strap. And there goes again the rule: don't ever change anything, even the smallest thing, when you're actually in competition on your big dive. So I went on the dive, and what happened now was that, of course, over all the training sessions we'd done, I had figured out pretty precisely how much air to put into my mask. I got a very good feeling for it, let's say, to put just enough air in, but not any more than I needed to, because obviously I needed to equalize. And that was like a fine, just a fine feeling, really fine-tuned feeling of exactly how much air am I going to put in the mask. Now that I tightened the strap, the mask felt different on my face. It was tighter. And on the way down, I completely messed up the equalization of the mask, because the mask felt tighter and I couldn't figure out anymore. Like, I lost the feeling. What is the mask being tighter because I've tightened the strap, and what's the mask being squeezing because I need to equalize it. So I actually didn't equalize the mask enough at all, already early on in the first meters before taking the mouthfeel. And then what happens once you've charged the mouthfeel, which, there my final alarm was in like 25 meters. Once you've done your final charge, you really don't want to put a lot of air in the mask anymore, because that's air from your mouthfeel, like you don't have any more. So I noticed probably in around sort of 60, 70 meters, I realized that, okay, I definitely haven't equalized the mask right. Didn't have a lot of air anymore to put in it at that point. As you can imagine, in 60, 70 meters going down quickly, you don't have a lot of air to spare. So I equalized it a bit, but I did realize that I can't fully equalize it properly anymore. So at that point, I thought about, okay, do I need to stop? Like, is that a stop? Am I going to come up no limits? We had actually a really good safety system. So I had a no limits tank on the sled. So in case there was any problem, including, for example, you rupture an eardrum at depth, right? And you feel disoriented. I had the option to come up in no limits, as a safety sort of backup. And I thought, okay, maybe I have to stop. But I felt that the mask was tight, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was, you realize that maybe I will have a little bit of a mask squeeze, but I thought, okay, well, world record attempt, I can live with a bit of a mask squeeze. And unless it's starting to be uncomfortable and feel like stressful and a problem, I'll keep going. So actually, it was never really uncomfortable. I felt pressure from it, but I didn't feel stressed. So I continued. And I got to the bottom, and when I reached the bottom, I wanted to open my eyes, and realized that I can't actually open my eyes, because what I'd felt as pressure was the fact that the mask, rather than sort of sucking my face with a vacuum, what had happened was the very soft silicone of the Sphera mask had been sucked inwards into the mask, deformed into the mask, and was squeezing my eyes. It was literally sitting on top of my eyes and pushing on my face, which, felt like pressure, as if you stuck your fingers on your eyes and sort of pressed a bit, but not so that it was, horrible, let's say. It just, you feel a bit of pressure, but it feels a bit weird, but wasn't a problem. So, but I couldn't open my eyes. I couldn't see. So again, for me, like, I was thinking, all right, oh well, never mind. I stuck one finger on the line and started swimming up, thinking I don't really have to see to kick up, like whatever. Yeah. And then eventually the air will expand again in the mask, and then you'll see. I guess it's fine, right? So I was like well pleased with myself, because as far as I was concerned, the only issue this world record attempt was getting to 130 meters depth equalizing.
If you're a little
that
bit
was my main
blind
problem.
as you do it, then it's
Yeah,
doesn't
like
really
whatever,
matter.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, swimming up was never going to be my problem. The swim up never had been a problem on any of the training dives. Like I used to get contractions in the last 20 meters before the surface. Like, so me that's used to having contractions on the way down, like, oh, it was a breeze. Swimming up was a breeze. Equalizing down was the issue. So I was like, amazing, I made it. Totally brilliant. I was kicking up happily. And after I'd taken about 10 kicks off the bottom, the first contraction hit me, and a proper big contraction. And so I was in around 120 meters when I got a massive contraction. And that obviously was clearly a major issue. Having normally contractions between 20 meters and the surface on these dives, so suddenly you have a contraction in 120 meters depth, I knew absolutely something is completely wrong. And I had absolutely no way of knowing what that was and what it meant. Like, what is this going to mean now for me? And I had a really clear sort of thought went through my head where I thought, okay, I might not make it to Andrea. And this might be the first time they're going to need to use the counterballast system.
And Andrea was doing a safety dive for you, so he was at 40,
he was the
50
deep.
meters?
He was in 50 with a scooter. We actually pioneered the scooter safety during my world record attempt already during training. We used to have Andrea on the scooter doing deep safety for me, and was then used later on in the world championships in that same year. So we were the first ones actually to use a scooter for safety. So he was there in 50 waiting for me with a scooter, and I thought I might not make it that far. In fact, I might not make it at all. I mean, I really clearly thought that. And then realized, okay, fine. So the only thing that going to help me now is to stay as calm and relaxed as possible. So I actually slowed down by quite a lot to try and conserve energy, and really tried to keep the contractions as soft as possible. Try to not let it, shake my shoulders, my upper body, try and keep it in the belly, and just keep kicking really. So I was sort of swimming along, having contractions, but also realized that I wasn't feeling bad. So I felt CO2, contractions, but I didn't feel low on oxygen, let's say, right? I felt clear other than that. Still couldn't really see very well, couldn't see. Tried to open my eye in around 60 meters and had to could squeeze one eye open a bit and see a little bit, because obviously I'd been having the contractions and I'd been sucking the air from the mask with each contraction. So that's why the mask hadn't really... the air in the mask hadn't really expanded much. So I was still not able to see very well. But in around 60, I could just about open one eye a bit and looked up and saw Andrea above me. And I remember clearly thinking, amazing, like, this is so cool. I'm totally going to make this, yeah? And I got a world record. And then I was kicking and pulling and kicking and pulling. And we have also video because Andrea had a GoPro on the scooter, where I look completely normal and I look very relaxed and I look quite happy and I'm kicking and pulling steadily in a good rhythm. And there's no sign of any distress or any problem or anything. And then from one moment to the next, I reach past the line and I'm out. It's just like someone's flicked a switch, really. And it was in 40 meters, so really deep.
Blacked out completely at 40 meters.
I just blacked out completely from one moment to the next. Like, how you normally can see that freedivers are in trouble. Right, the movements get jerky. They don't look right. You can tell that there's something already not okay anymore. So you can see me, and I look totally happy, completely fine, and then literally from 1 second to the next, I'm just out like a light in 40. So fortunately, Andrea was there with the scooter, and he they brought me up really quickly. And then up on the surface, I had Lotta and Linda and lots of people who were really amazing, because very experienced freedivers. Who just did such an awesome job at looking after me, I have to say. I mean, I've seen the video lots of times by now. And
it took quite a while to bring you around, didn't it? It
took a while, because as you can imagine, from a 130-meter dive with a 40-meter blackboard, it is going to take a while to bring someone around from that. That is never going to be just a little thing where you just wake up when you reach the surface.
Yeah, so, no, just blood on the face for that one.
It's never going to be like that. So Lotta gave me around 6 rescue breaths, I would say. And obviously I was squeezed, so there's blood and fluid. not that bad. In fact, I've seen worse people, I gotta say, a lot worse. So considering what had happened, it was actually not anywhere near as bad as it could have been. So they gave me around 6 rescue breaths and then decided that it wasn't any good. I wasn't waking up. So they got me on the platform where they had this Egyptian doctor from the Sharm search and rescue team, which is always on standby there with the evacuation boat. And it's actually really brilliant because they can bring you to the chamber in 7 minutes from the platform. So they actually started doing chest compressions, which probably I wouldn't have needed, but was for sure also not the wrong thing to do. It's just, according to the standards of first aid, that is what you would do, and it was for sure not wrong. And I woke up basically. So it took a little while. You don't wake up from that kind of thing and are suddenly awake. Like you're gonna wake up first into like a sort of dream state, and then I was extremely disoriented. Like you wake up and you don't know where you are and you don't know what's going on. So there's that phase where people are very, very disoriented. I saw it at this World Championships in Roatan on Walid when he came around from his deep blackout. He had that same look on the face that I had when I woke up from that. I know very well how he was feeling. And then, you come around, but it's interesting about 10 minutes afterwards on the video, like I have color in my face and I take the oxygen out of my mouth and I say, what the hell did I do? Because the thing is also I'd never had a proper blackout before in freediving, so yeah. I didn't know, or a squeeze. I didn't know how you're supposed to feel when you have it. I didn't know what had happened. I didn't know I'd blacked out in 40 meters. How would I know? I was out, right? So I had no idea. So it was all a bit wild. I recovered really quickly, fortunately, as we fortunately do from our squeezes. The thing was that we just couldn't figure out at all why it had happened. It just made no sense that you would have suddenly a blackout in 40 meters and contractions at that depth when everything's been going fine until that point, and no competition stress, no nerves, no bad day, no can explain that. A bad day might have explained that blackout in 10 meters or 20, but not in 40 and with contractions in 120 meters. So it took me, because I couldn't figure out what had happened, for me, it was clear that there must be a deep underlying issue somewhere. If we can't find out what it was on the day, then to me it meant that it'll have to be something to do with me. And it can happen again. And that would have been the end for me of deep freediving. Like I'd already made that decision in my mind that if I cannot find out what went on, stop deep freediving, because that would be so irresponsible. Like you can't do that to yourself, and you can't do that also to the people who are supposed to rescue you. Like that is nuts. And I have an autoimmune disease, which quite a lot of people have, actually also a few other freedivers, which is an autoimmune disease that affects the thyroid massively, but also your whole immune system and gives you all sorts of problems. And so it could have been, because who studied that? Nobody knows what on earth, is going on with that disease in the first place. And then in combination with freediving, it affects, for example, your heart rate. It can give you irregular heartbeat. So actually one year that I didn't really compete well in during the World Championships in Cyprus 2 years ago, at the start of the season when I went to train, I was having massive thyroid issues. Like I was having irregular heartbeat, and that I pulled out of one competition in Sharm then, because you don't go to your maximum depth when you have an irregular heartbeat and you don't exactly know why, right? So things like that you have to pay attention to. So I thought, okay, it's then something to do with me and my autoimmune disease, and then I can't do this anymore. So when I got home to Berlin, it was 1 month before the World Championships, and I went to one last doctor as a last hope, and he's actually a very high level sports doctor looking after Olympic athletes. But his first trade is he's a lung specialist. And he's also a diving doctor. So it's perfection for a freediver. Loves sports, diving, awesome. I love him. And I wrote to this guy because you can never ever get an appointment, right? And someone gave me his email address because someone I know knows him. And I wrote to him and said, look, this has happened to me. I'm this person. I have 1 month to go to a world championship. Someone has to tell me honestly whether I can go or not, right? Because any normal doctor would have just banned you, right? Because they're gonna also, they don't know, and if they don't know, they're gonna just say don't dive, right? So and any other doctor who would have just given me the all clear, I wouldn't have trusted with the all clear either, because I would have gone, well, you don't really know, you've just looked in my ears and taken my heart rate, and that's not good enough, you know. Something went really wrong here. Somebody has to find out what it was. So I went there not expecting to ever actually find out what happened. But told the guy every single detail that I could remember from my preparation for the dive, the training, the day itself, how hot it was, how I felt, like everything. And when I said to him, I tightened the mask, and then, you know, I was going down and I could feel that the mask was too tight, and then I charged my mouthful, and I remember he said, mm-hmm. And I remember thinking, oh, this guy knows what a mouthful is. That's amazing. I love him. Like, awesome. And when I was finished with my whole story, he said, okay, so I can tell you why you blacked out. And my jaw must have just dropped, because I was expecting, yeah, we're going to take some blood and do some tests, and then maybe, you know. He said, yeah, no, I can tell you why you blacked out. And so he said, look, there's this thing, it's called the oculocardiac reflex. And they actually use it in emergency medicine when people have a ridiculously high heart rate and they need to get someone's heart rate down immediately. They press on their eyes with their thumbs. So he said, if I was to stick my fingers on your eyes right here now in this office and put pressure on your eyes, you would be unconscious in 20 seconds. Around 20 seconds it would take me to make you black out. And if the pressure doesn't get relieved, it can even go to cardiac arrest. So what happens with this is basically the body interprets pressure on the eyes as a danger to the brain, as overpressure in the head, danger to the brain, overpressure in the eyes. So it could damage the optical nerve, it could damage the brain, it could damage the eyes. It's much as the effect that when you have we know this from scuba diving, if you have a hood that's too tight or a neck seal that's too tight, right? You have the same thing. Your body thinks there's too much pressure in the head, and it will try to remove it. So what happens is it will slow down your heart rate more and more and more and more, to the point of basically blackout or even cardiac arrest if the pressure doesn't get relieved in extreme cases. And the other thing it will do, so obviously slowing down your heart rate for a freediver, all right, we know that bit, but to the point of no heart rate anymore is a bit extreme. And also the other thing that really is interesting for us freedivers is it will have massive vasodilation. So it will try everything to get the blood out of your head. So instead of vasoconstriction, where we in freedivers have blood vessels that constrict in our arms and legs to redistribute the blood to your brain, we have vasodilation, so basically getting the blood out of your brain and into your arms and legs, which will basically make you black out as a freediver pretty swiftly. So that's what I did to myself on a 130-meter dive without knowing it, by having the pressure on my eyes from the mask. And he said to me that actually it's completely amazing that I even swam until 40, because by all accounts I should have been out possibly in around 80 to 100 meters, really. And I think if I had had any freak out at all whatsoever, the smallest hint of panic or stress, that would have been it for sure. There's no way I would have gone anywhere at all. I would have blacked out extremely deep. Would have been really horrendously bad accident. So then after this all happened, people were saying to me, well, so are you like going to stop diving with a mask now? Because it's obviously dangerous to dive with a mask. And I said, no, it's not at all dangerous to dive with a mask. The danger here and the risk, and people go, oh, sled diving, it's obviously very bad to sled dive. Yes, of course, there's a lot of risk in sled diving. I don't disagree. Good care of that. But actually, in this case, the danger was the lack of knowledge. What caused this accident was the lack of knowledge, the fact that none of us knew that this is a risk. I've actually spoken to at least 4 other freedivers who have had the same thing happen to them when they were constant weight diving with a mask. Rune Harlem Sorensen from Denmark has had it with Cressy Minima. Jakob Hansen, also from Denmark, had it with a Sphera. Another freediver from France had it also with a Sphera. So they all had it in constant weight diving, where they basically were unable to open their eyes at the bottom because the mask was putting pressure on the eyes. So other people have had this happen, but they weren't on such deep dives, and the dive was probably not that long, so the pressure wasn't that much, so they didn't have an accident with it, but they could have had quite easily. So it's easy to solve. I mean, if you know it, then obviously when you feel pressure from the mask, you turn around. It's very simple. Or I could have taken the mask off. I could have flooded the mask. I mean, there's a whole load of things I could have done had I understood that this is even a factor, right? So that's so interesting that there's always still some sort of outside freak incident that can hit you. And you can never underestimate how much safety you need, how much you have to take care of your safety setup, actually. And your strength, really, because that's what you're going to need to save yourself at that moment as well. Your mental and your physical strength, actually. So being conservative a little bit with your limits is so essential.
It sounds like you were really lucky there, and but since this has happened and you've discovered what the reason is, it's that extra little bit of knowledge that we can add to the freediving community. It's something else that is in the collective minds of people when they dive now, so it makes it a little bit safer. And
that's right. Somebody just had to be the first to find it out, and that was me.
Unfortunately, it was you. And and also just got, there's that saying that the more moving parts a machine has, the more things that can go wrong. So a mask on a deep dive like that as well is that one of those extra moving parts that you have to be really conscious of and make sure that everything is that you have everything exactly nailed down.
Yeah, the same thing goes also for your nose clip and your fluid goggles. And the thing is, the advantage of diving with the mask, which I definitely miss now that I've been diving with the nose clip, is I can see. I can see very, very clearly, and I felt very safe being able to see clearly, especially when diving with a sled. Where I have to open a valve, I have to use the brake, I have to it felt very, very much safer diving with the mask and being able to see that well. I got to say, I just love it. But yeah, there's always pros and cons. Ultimately, you have to try and take care of all the details and be aware of really what's going on and what you're doing. And for sure, so my mistake was not to turn around, when I felt the pressure. But I clearly evaluated it, and it didn't feel bad, and I actually didn't have a mask squeeze. I had no mask squeeze at all. So interestingly enough, right, no mask squeeze, because it wasn't the vacuum that was causing me any distress. It was just that the mask was instead actually pressing on my face, which is what happened and seems to happen with those very soft silicone freediving masks. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Do you wear fluid goggles now? Have you tried wearing fluid goggles?
I have a pair of fluid goggles. The problem with it is for me that I am one of those people that really struggles when with a very strong swallow reflex, stress reflex, when there's water moving on my face, especially across the eyes, the area of the eyes. I don't mind opening my eyes in the water at all. I mean, I used to do it always when scuba diving with mask, without mask, no issue. But when the water is rushing past my face, it makes me it gives me a swallow reflex. So it's helped me with the nose clip to cover most of the face. So I wear one of those large Sphera swimming goggles, and that is not a fluid goggle. So yeah, I have a fluid goggle, but it's not big enough. So I think I have to get much, much more comfortable with the nose clip. Hopefully, eventually, I'll be that comfortable that it won't bother me anymore when there's water moving on my face.
Yeah. And
then I could go to use the fluid goggles. Yeah.
So you were saying that you have you took the opportunity to travel around and visit a lot of different places to freedive. if you could choose one place to dive in for the rest of your life that you visited, where would it be?
Oh my God, for the rest of my life. Oh
Yeah, sorry,
no.
it's not a very fair question, but
That's a horrible
it's
question.
for entertainment purposes.
Oh my God, no. Wow. Oh God, I'm really overwhelmed by that. For
Okay,
the rest of my life.
let's say 90% of your life. You have
So
10% where you can
hard.
take the occasional trip, but I'm only going to give you 90%.
90%. Oh God, I don't think I can answer that question. That drives me mad. There are so many places I still want to visit, and so many places I love diving in. Okay, for pure ease of training, it would be Sharm el Sheikh, because simply stepping off the shore, having the most amazing depth, but also the most amazing marine life, so close to shore, is just outstanding. So for that, for the pure ease of diving, and training with depth and everything, it is spectacular there. Having said that, for the sort of, hanging out and living around that, it's just not where I would want to spend the rest of my life, diving only there. So that's kind of like, those two things don't go together. Dahab would be much more nice for that, but the blue hole just isn't quite deep enough anymore these days.
Not deep enough for you.
Yeah, for some of the things I want to do anyway. So it's hard, because all these environments are so different, right? But the warm water of the Red Sea and the marine life of the Red Sea, I have to say, are one of the best I've had ever in all my traveling around, and they still are among my favorites in the world. So that probably would be where I would go most if I had to choose, is the Red Sea.
What other I mean, I know that you really love to snowboard. You like to do outdoor stuff. You do a bit of trail running, I believe, as well.
No, because I've done a little bit, because I'm spending some time in the mountains when I can, but it's actually forbidden. Because
Forbidden?
Not forbidden, but my quite amazing sports doctor, all those years ago, I'm his pet project, so he makes me do the whole cycling tests and everything every year, because I get my diving medical for him, and he puts me through everything he can think of. And he also told me that I must quit all endurance training, all of it, because I still used to run. I still used to run for an hour and sometimes an hour and a half, because I enjoy it. And he said it has to stop endurance training. No endurance training. Don't do it, because it doesn't help freediving. So in fact, I've completely changed all my training to doing really purely, or almost purely, training that's anaerobic. Or largely anaerobic, very, very high focus on anaerobic training with hardly any endurance. So I don't really go for runs anymore. I don't go for long runs. So occasionally, when I can't do anything else, I just put my shoes on and I go out for a run, like on New Year's Day. And, when I'm in the mountains, I ran around the trails a little bit and things like that for fun. But I avoid doing a lot of it completely. And to me, that has made a big change. Like, it's brilliant, actually. It works very well for freediving. It works very, very well for me anyway.
What kind of change is it that you've noticed?
I've noticed that I was much stronger in the water. So I used to, when I started doing the CrossFit training, like the change in how strong I felt diving constant weight was pretty spectacular. I used to get really burning legs on the way up and things like that. And that's not and that's not that I hadn't trained. Like, I used to always do a fitness training phase to get ready for the deep diving, right? So I've just changed how I do it. And so since I've started training differently, the leg burn, the effort that I felt the dive took me completely changed. Like, I was rocketing up from depths that I felt were no issue, where before I would have come up fine oxygen-wise, but that would have felt hard. It didn't feel hard anymore. Nothing felt hard. Swimming up just didn't feel hard anymore at all. And that was a big difference, a really, really big difference. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty depressing for me to hear, because I love to run, and I'm actually training for like a long trail run at the moment. But I know that it's like it's counterproductive to my goals to progress massively in freediving over the next few years. So I think I'm going to have to take my shoes and my lovely Salomon trail running shoes and put them in a little box and put them away for a couple of years. And
you have to sort of you have to move it to a shorter winter season break, but then you're going to have to untrain that when you freedive again.
Well, we don't really have a winter here, so it's
Yeah, so you can do it, yeah.
I'm really gonna have
Yeah,
to
it's
force
tough.
myself.
You might have to sort of say 1 year is for freediving, 1 year is for trail running. But yeah, I know. I'm always like, because like this doctor of mine, he's the medical director of the Berlin Marathon. So I'm always, when I'm here, I always go to look at the marathon. I'm always thinking, oh God, I would love to run one again. And I said to him, when I'm done with this freediving competing business, then I'll get back to doing some running and some endurance and some distance stuff, and it'll be beautiful. I'm really looking forward to it as well.
Yeah, it's a really special feeling to go out for an hour or 2, 3 hours at a time and just run through nature and in the mountains, and it's very different from freediving, but it's like freediving gets you into a flow state very quickly, kind of like shortcuts you into a flow state, but the kind of flow state that you get into when you're trail running, after 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour, it gets very deep.
Yes, exactly. And you're just alone with yourself and your thoughts for such a long time. Right. And that I find also quite amazing. No, you have those moments, and when it goes well, we know this a little bit from static, when a static goes well, you don't even really know what you were thinking about anymore afterwards. It's similar when you go running, right? When you're running and on a good day, your thoughts will just meander around, right? And suddenly 40 minutes have passed. You don't even know where they went. On bad days, you can't let your thoughts drift away. You're constantly thinking about, oh my God, how far have I been running? How long has it been? And you look at your watch and 5 minutes have passed, and you go, oh my God, only 5 minutes. Shit, that felt like an hour. And then you can't get out of your head. You can't get away from what you're doing. Everything feels hard. And on the good days, your brain just goes off, on its own, and you're running along and you're thinking about all sorts of things, and in running, that can be, like you said, for hours, and that's absolutely beautiful. Whereas for freediving, that's only ever going to be for minutes at a maximum, and it's just completely different things. Yeah, so I look forward to going back to doing some endurance stuff. Absolutely, I do. Hiking, running.
What I love about running is that after I've been running and I get into that state that I can't really describe adequately, but I get really good ideas, and I'm able to think of a subject and I'm able to analyze it, almost stand outside it and revolve it and look at it and come to conclusions about things. I don't get that kind of state or that ability at any other time, and certainly on a 2-3 minute free dive, you can't really start thinking about rearranging your life or something like that.
Well, that is actually like that. Yeah, that's very true, and that is a known thing. Also in how our brain works and in psychology, that you need sometimes when you try to focus on an issue too strongly, it's stressful. So actually, what you need to be a little bit occupied with something. And then your brain is free to work away underneath, almost like rendering a program on your computer while you're doing something else. Right? That's running along behind, or downloading something. You can still do something else. Yeah. So if you say, for example, watching television and you're watching something quite mindless on TV that doesn't really need your full attention, your brain can still work at the same time, but without focusing on a problem. So you might suddenly get creative ideas, for example. Or when you're in the shower, lots of people say in the shower, because you're showering, you're doing something, but your mind drifts and your mind wanders, and it wanders into places, and problems, solutions, or creative ideas suddenly hit you at that moment. And that's the same thing in running, right? You're running, you're busy, you're doing something, but you're not occupied mentally with anything specific, and you're not actually sitting there thinking, okay, I have to write this book. What am I going to write about, right? It'll just come to you at that moment. It frees your mind to just allow it to work away, and the ideas just pop into your head, and it's amazing. That's really magical.
Which people would you say have been most influential in your life?
In my whole life? Wow. For sure, my parents, of course, I think as in everybody's, but even also in where I am now with freediving and how I live my life, largely also my parents, because they were really quite unconventional and adventurous. So we we never used to go in hotels, like all-inclusive hotels for holiday or something. Never. We used to always go, either we were sailing or we were driving to rent a little cottage somewhere, or hiking around the mountains, or like it just was completely unconventional how we used to travel as a family.
The adventurous spirit in you.
Absolutely, yeah, totally. Often used to just travel somewhere without a hotel, so then we would have to find somewhere to stay, which wasn't always brilliant, I tell you, but it makes you. It makes you also not scared of just going places and finding your way around, right? I learned that really, really early on. It was just the way we moved around, even as a family. We used to do lots of fun things, exercise, sports, adventures. It was just such a big part of my childhood growing up. That stuck with me for sure. To this day is why I like going new places and trying out all these things. I think that really has something to do with how I grew up. So my parents for sure, and then as we all have the odd teacher in school that really was influential in how you see certain things. In diving, I would say absolutely Aaron Bruce, my technical instructor. Probably one of the biggest influences even to how I dive today and how I approach diving today, how I approach risk management, because I learned everything about risk management, about being honest with yourself, respecting your limits, knowing where they are. Even that's quite a tricky thing. Like, how do I know where my limit is? Yeah, and I have a very good feel for my own limits and what I can get away with. I'm not always conservative in my diving. I have a tendency to announce personal bests in competition, including world championships. But I usually know quite well whether I can do that or not. And that's why in 10 years of freediving, if we now take aside maybe the accident, which was quite spectacular for spectacular reasons, in 10 years of freediving, I've had two blackouts in a depth competition in 10 years of freediving. One was on the surface and one was in 5 meters this year in vertical blue, trying for a ridiculous no fins dive. So I think when I look around, that is actually very, very little. There aren't many people who've dived for 10 years and dived also not that conservatively with so little blackouts. And I've never really had one blackout on the surface in training in 10 years of freediving. So that's because I'm really able to know my limits. I'm really able to know myself, to judge myself, and I act on it as well. It's not just that I know myself, I also choose to act on it usually. And that's really a lot to do with Aaron, who drummed that into us when I was doing my technical diving training with him. So he's a very big influence on how I dive and always will be. And then, of course, my freediving instructors, Emma, who got me the love of it that first day and recognized, I think, in me someone who was hooked and had the ability. So she didn't hold me back, right? She just allowed me to go right straight to the bottom after an hour and let me do that. And that gave me confidence in that I could, right? If you have an instructor that says, of course you're fine, off you go, enjoy, then you go, right, brilliant, okay, I will, Whereas if an instructor is like, oh no, it's too early, right? So it also takes a good instructor to be able to spot the ability in a student that has only been there for an hour, but she saw in me the person that already has been in the water and at depth so much that I was really comfortable with it, and she just let me get on with it, and it was great. But then after that, I have to say, actually Lotte and Linda from Freedive Café, both of them, they got me into the competition because I arrived there and they said, right, you're coming back to triple depth and you can do the German records. And I hadn't even thought of doing competition or records. It wasn't even an idea in my head. And they basically, they have that same competitive spirit and, the love of the sport and of sports and competing and challenging yourself and not being afraid of that. So that I found a home there with those two. for that side of me, and those sort of things merged. So I'd say they'd be very influential on me and my diving, and also the approach to freediving. And then the third one is Andrea, of course, Andrea Zuccari, who I've done my tandem world record with, who mentally functions in a very similar way to me as an athlete when he's diving. And so wordlessly, we would understand each other. And he was a brilliant coach for me because he usually knew what on earth was going on in my head, in my subconscious, and could act on it as a coach. And that's a really important thing in a coach, right? To understand you, to understand the athlete. And he was brilliant at that. And so he was a wonderful coach for me. And that's where I really did my best performances, when I was working with Andrea. And obviously also the reason why we could do the tandem world record together, because that takes a lot of trust to dive that deep with another person. So I'd say those are the people that really have made a huge difference to me in diving. Yeah, to where I am right now. Mm-hmm.
So usually I ask my guests to recommend a book or an author for the listeners, but you might be almost the perfect candidate for this one, since I mean you actually have a bookstore, right, in Berlin?
Yeah, I do. I don't have time for it anymore because I'm so busy with working for the German Navy. But my mom, she has to run it now without me at the moment. But it's still there. And yeah, I still love it. I still go in and tidy things up every so often. But yeah, I do. I have a bookshop in Berlin. Yeah.
So what's your, if you could recommend an author or a book to the listeners, what would it be?
Okay, I would recommend to read Joe Simpson, Touching the Void.
Oh yeah, the climbing story.
That's right. Yeah. Yes, I think that is one of the most outstanding survival stories in the world. And basically it's about a pair of climbers that, so for people who don't know this, it's a pair of climbers that set out to do a first ascent of a mountain, or I don't even know if it's a first ascent, but anyway, they go up and things go wrong, as they do when you're in the mountains, and the one of them breaks their leg, and I don't want to take everything away, but obviously he survives because he can write the book. But what really fascinates me about this book is two things. It's on the one hand his survival spirit, so the absolute ridiculous strength that humans can have when they need to survive. And to not give up, and the mental strength at that point to keep going and find new ways and get himself out of the situation. And then also, and I think this is very relevant to us freedivers, the buddying situation, because his climbing partner has to leave the mountain and obviously thinks he's left his buddy behind for dead. And this is a huge issue because we buddy each other and we put each other's lives, into each other's hands. And the responsibility we take there, we don't even think about enough, I think, sometimes. And that includes what I place on my buddy, what I expect from my buddy. And that's one thing I said early on, that I was ready to give up freediving if I couldn't have found out what caused my accident. Because to me, it's not just that it's nuts to risk my life in that way. It's also completely unfair to put this risk on the person who's safetying me. That is not acceptable in my mind, right? If I have this unknown risk that something can go wrong with me because I have a disease that can cause it, that is not for a buddy to have to deal with, right? And so we need to think about these things very clearly and very consciously when we provide safety to each other, and when we ask to people to provide safety for us in competitions and so on. And this situation is really the absolute extreme, and the absolute extreme choices had to be made. And how blame or no blame, gets felt or apportioned afterwards. It's very interesting, like the psychology behind it, and it's an amazing book, and really it's riveting, the survival story. And they made an incredible documentary out of it as well.
Yes,
beautifully filmed.
Documentary stroke drama with some acting. It's
they
really fantastic movie.
they reenacted some of the scenes, and so you get the feel of the mountain, but they interview the people as well, and it's just like you're on the edge of your seat. You can't look away from it.
Yeah, it's horribly nail biting stuff.
Right, isn't it? Like, and I found it was driving me crazy. And of course, I knew that it goes well because he sits there and tells the story, so you know who he survives. But it's still like you can't. It's almost unbearable.
Yeah,
like,
but the thing is, when you watch it for even the third, because I used to be a climber, so I watched it hundreds of times. But if you watch it for the third or the fourth time, you're still on the edge of your seat, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would recommend that as a book. That's really an awesome book to read, but it's also very relevant to freediving, actually, I think, in many ways. Some of that sense of exploration and the mental strength required there, it's like I had to have that when a contraction hit me in 120 meters. I didn't have the option to panic. It's not an option. So, and obviously Joe Simpson had to deal with it a lot longer, but he also didn't have the option to panic. If he had, then he wouldn't have made it. So yeah, his mental and physical strength and the pressure put on to that buddy system there, how that went, incredible. I find it such an unbelievable story. So that's what I would recommend for those who haven't read that. That would be my one book.
Yeah,
to read for the freedivers. Not a freediving book, something totally different.
Yeah. So what are your plans? Are you planning on doing some competitions next year, or are you taking a break?
Well, I had some big plans this year, didn't I? This was going to be my big come back to freediving and train some more. Finally, I'd taken the time to have a longer freediving period where I might have a little bit more than just 2.5 weeks to prepare for a competition. So, I had World Championships in Roatan, which wasn't even planned as my peak because, again, I had only a little bit over 2 weeks to train before the event. But then I was going to Dominica immediately afterwards. So it would have been a total of around 2 months of actually freediving. And I really thought that's going to be awesome. And I might solve some of my nose clip issues with the help of Johnny Sanex. And then I got blown out of Dominica by a hurricane. So it was a massive adventure, but an adventure of a different kind. Not quite what I'd had in mind when I went there, to experience a Category 5 hurricane firsthand. So my freediving plans for this year kind of got blown away, followed by Cyprus, where the storm also cancelled our competition. So I'm not going very well with depth. And next year, I really don't know. It's going to be hard. I so would love to get back to some depth. I haven't done real depth, in about 5 years now, and I'm really missing it. But the problem is I'm unbelievably busy with really fascinating work, working for the German military, and it's a massive job, a massive project, and it takes. The problem with it is that is all my traveling. So because I'm constantly away, staying at the military bases, so I'm already always away and not at home, and that's where I normally would have been able to freedive. That's taken up. All my travel is taken up by being away on military bases at the moment.
Is that a freediving related job that you're doing with the Navy?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes, it is. Yeah, totally. I since 2015, I have been working with the German Navy to help them improve their apnea training in all of the diving divisions, which all of them actually, and there are 5 that have to do with underwater some way, have some apnea elements, and so I'm helping them redesign, assess first of all, and then redevelop all of the apnea parts, and especially the special forces, so like the Navy SEALs and the mine clearing divers and those guys, but also the people teaching the submarine escape, the people teaching the escape from a helicopter that sinks, and the people who are teaching the basic diving. And it's really interesting and very, very tricky, needs all my knowledge of diving. Actually, I couldn't do it if I was just a freediver, because the thing that actually makes this possible for me to do at a high level is the fact that I'm a technical diver. knowledge of the equipment that they use and what they're training for, because they're not training to become freedivers, right? They use freediving for very specific reasons, to create stress, to teach stress resistance, to find people who will never be all right under stress underwater and kick them out before they get into dangerous situations. So they have a completely different reason for using apnea, and you can't just teach them what you would normally teach a freediver. It would be completely wrong. So I have to rethink everything and put all the knowledge I have of years, of decades of diving together to figure out something that works for them. So it's very interesting, very challenging, and that kind of takes all my energy and my time at the moment, and it leaves me with very limited time to spend deep freediving, unfortunately. But I also love it, so it's brilliant. I'm not complaining. It's really good. Apart from that, they pay me, which helps. But it's also really interesting. I mean, I get to do things like I did a submarine escape, myself. I go through any of the things that I can do myself. I do. So I have a better understanding what we're trying to achieve when we're teaching people. So, I've dived I've had a swim around on the rebreather units that they use. I've done a submarine escape training, course. I've been in a submarine. All things that you would never get to do normally. It's fascinating. Yeah. So that's taking much time. So I would love to get to Dominica if Johnny manages to put things together there and rebuild enough to run a competition. Then, and if it doesn't clash with any of my military courses that I have to run, which is the difficult part, then I would like to go to Dominica. I'd love to go to Vertical Blue again, but I have to see how it works. And again, I'm going to be in a situation where I will arrive at these events with 2 weeks of training. That's going to be the same again, next year, I think.
It sounds like you have a pretty amazing and fascinating gig with the German military at the moment. Like, you're basically teaching them how to do like Mission Impossible stuff, right?
Yeah, sort of. We're doing all sorts of things, and it's largely I'm improving safety in some areas, and then improving also how efficient the exercises are. Really, like even the 50-meter dynamic, you have to think about why are you doing it, and are we achieving what we are trying to achieve with that, or is that just like a random thing that we just do every day and it has a bit of an effect, but not really a lot. And so, we looking at every approach in every part of what they're doing, and whether it actually makes sense for them rather than just pure bit of apnea, which is nice, but maybe not that useful. So I also have to step away a lot from what I think is normal or good in apnea, because that's good for freediving, but it's maybe not good for what they're trying to achieve.
Not so relevant to them, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So you have to really be able to let go of your regular structured things that you've learned or that you use, because that may make no sense at all to them. And that's really interesting, because I have to just constantly rethink everything. So that challenges me at a very high level, which is something I really like. So yeah, that'll keep me busy next year.
So just to take us out, Anna, can you say in a few words, why do you freedive?
I freedive because I love the ocean, the depth, the pure depth, and discovering these spaces and myself within them.
Thank you. Usually when I say in a few words, because you've talked so extensively about everything else, I didn't expect just like
that to be that
one
short.
sentence.
Yeah, but there you go. That is it, really.
No, that's perfect. Thank you. Okay, it's been amazing. Thank you so much. I'm going to thank you for taking the time, and I'm going to let you go off and enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Is it still Sunday?
Yes, Sunday. It's still Sunday. Yes, I'm just getting started now. Gonna go have my first coffee.
It's thank you for waiting. I don't know how you can wait for 2 hours before you had your coffee.
No, I know, right? Horrendous.
Thank you so much, Anna. It's been lovely talking to you, and hopefully we can talk again sometime soon.
I love the project. It's really brilliant, like for all of us. So thank you from all the freedivers.
Thank you. Okay, take care.
All right, we'll chat
Bye.
soon. Bye.
Bye-bye. That was Anna von Boetticher. Anna was so much fun, and I can't wait to meet her in person one day and sit down for a real good blather. Good luck to her and all her aspirations for the future. Don't forget to take advantage of our special offer from Tubi Free Equipment. They have amazing gear, and you get free worldwide shipping when you use the message Freedive Café free shipping in the order notes. Go to tubefreeequipment.com, that's the number 2, Be Free Equipment, and check it out. Feel free to add me on Facebook, where I am Donny Mac. Follow me on Instagram, where I am Donny McFar, DONNYMCFAR. And otherwise, if you have any questions or suggestions, you can also contact me through the website. The feedback I receive from listeners is the biggest motivation to keep the episodes coming, so don't be shy. Until we meet again, dive safe.